Hey guys, in this video we're going to talk about LED headlight bulbs. Specifically, I was able to find some LED headlights for the second generation Prius that don't suck. Actually, they're pretty good. So let's get started. Before we start the video, let me give you a quick rundown. I'm going to break this video into sections, and each section will have its own chapter. So you can find the information you're looking for by skipping to the appropriate chapter. We're going to start off with a brief introduction and some backstory. Then I'm going to do an unboxing of the LED headlight bulbs. Next, I'm going to show you how to install them. And then we're going to compare the LEDs to some halogen headlights. First of all, the second generation Prius came from the factory with two different types of headlights, halogen or HID. My Prius came with halogen headlights. The LED light bulbs featured in this video are designed to replace halogen headlights. They are not meant to replace HID headlights. If your Prius has HID headlights, these LED bulbs will not work in your car. Now apparently it is possible to convert from HID bulbs to LEDs, but I'm not familiar with that process, and I'm not going to cover it in this video. Before we start the review, let me give you some backstory. About a year after I bought the car, the headlights burned out, so I replaced them with Sylvania bulbs. These headlight bulbs are supposed to be like OEM Plus. They're a little bit brighter than stock, but not super bright. Unfortunately, those headlights lasted less than 3 months. Needless to say, I was not impressed. I replaced those headlights with a different brand. Once again, these are basically OEM Plus. They're meant to be slightly brighter than stock, but not super bright. And these Philips headlights were perfectly fine. Shortly after that, a vendor approached me with an offer to test some LED headlights. I was actually considering LED headlights at the time, so I figured, what the heck. But I knew the LED bulbs with the big heat sinks on them wouldn't work because of how the Prius headlights are designed. More on that later. So I checked their website to see if they had any LED bulbs without the big heat sinks, and they did. So I had them send me a pair of those. They also sent me some interior lights, but we'll talk about that in a separate video. Now I have to admit, I was a little skeptical. Replacing halogen bulbs with LEDs seems to be hit or miss. I've seen reviews where the LED bulbs create a bunch of glare and a terrible beam pattern. But I've also seen reviews where the LED bulbs worked great. I guess you could say I was cautiously optimistic. Okay, so the LED headlights have arrived. Let's open up the box and see what they look like. I have to admit, the packaging looks nice. They also included a user manual. And the headlight bulbs are packed in closed cell foam. I have to admit, I'm impressed. And check out these light bulbs. It looks like they're machined from aluminum. To put things in perspective, the halogen bulbs are made of sheet metal, and they're packaged in cheap plastic. Once again, the back end of the bulb does not have a big heatsink. That's pretty important, and you'll see why soon enough. Here you can see the high beam and the low beam LEDs. They're actually separate LEDs. That's interesting. Now I'm going to show you how to install the LED headlight bulbs. But first, we need to move some stuff out of the way. For example, this plastic piece needs to come out. It's held in place with a bunch of plastic rivets. Here's what they look like. To remove them, you can use a trim tool or a screwdriver to pry out the center part. Then you can pry out the rest of it. Great, now I gotta dig that out of the engine bay. Give me a sec. Okay, now we can remove that plastic trim piece. Next, we're going to remove this piece of ductwork on the right side of the engine bay. It has one of those plastic rivets holding it in place. Once again, you can use a trim tool or a small screwdriver to remove it. Then the ductwork comes right out. Now you have access to the right side headlight bulb. That electrical plug in the center of the screen with the blue and the purple wire, that's the headlight connector. Now we're moving over to the left side of the car. On this side we have a fuse box right behind the headlight. If you remove the cover from the fuse box, that'll give you some more room to work. Just press this tab on the front and the lid comes right off. And if you look down in there, you can see the electrical plug for the headlight. You can just pull it straight off. As you can see, the space behind the headlight is pretty tight. There's no way I can get a light and a camera and my hand all in there to show you how to replace the headlight bulbs. So instead, I'm going to remove one of the headlight assemblies from the car. Now, you don't need to do this. I'm only doing it to make the filming easier. Anyway, now you can see the back of the headlight assembly. Once again, the electrical plug just pulls straight off. There's no release tab or anything. Next, we need to remove this big rubber grommet. You'll notice it has two knobs that you can use to rotate it. You need to turn it about 45 degrees or so and it'll pop loose. With that grommet out of the way, we can remove the headlight bulb. It has a retainer clip that needs to be detached. You press on this little tab to disengage it and move the retainer clip out of the way. And now you can remove the headlight bulb. By the way, if you plan to keep the headlight bulb as a spare or something, be careful not to touch the glass part of the bulb. The oils on your skin can damage it. Installing the new headlight bulbs is basically the inverse of removal. Is it the inverse? Install equals 1 over removal? Or maybe it's the negative. Install equals minus removal. Anyway, when you install the new light bulbs, make sure those little tabs on the outside are properly seated in the headlight housing. That might be tricky to do with the headlight assembly in the car, but you'll just have to learn to do it by feel. And of course, we need to reinstall the big rubber grommet. By the way, that rubber grommet is the reason why we can't use LED lights with the big heat sinks on the back. Because that rubber grommet fits around the back end of the headlight bulb. It's designed that way to seal out moisture and debris. Actually, you can see I'm having some trouble getting the grommet reinstalled because it's a tight fit. After you get it on there, you need to rotate it until it locks into place. Then you can plug in the electrical connector and you're done. Well, you're almost done. You still need to reinstall those plastic pieces we removed at the beginning. Okay, now comes the most important part of the video, and that is where we compare the LED headlights to the halogen headlights. I'm going to do a total of 3 tests. The first test will be simply driving the car past the camera and see what it looks like. This will tell us if the headlights bother oncoming drivers. This is kind of important because if you blind oncoming drivers, they might crash into your car, and that would be bad. The second test will be dash cam footage driving in the dark so we can see how well the headlights light up the road. And last but not least, we'll shine the headlights against a flat surface and see what the beam pattern looks like. Alright, on with the first test. To simulate the viewpoint of an oncoming driver, I'm going to put the camera on a tripod right about head level of someone sitting in a car. Then I will drive toward the camera. First up is the halogen headlights. Once again, these are the Philips Vision Plus headlights. They're a little bit brighter than stock, and as we might expect, they don't create a lot of glare. Now let's see how the LED headlights compare. Alright, we're coming around the bend. This is the moment of truth. Okay, that's not bad. For an oncoming driver, that should be perfectly acceptable. Actually, let's look at them side by side. We have the halogen headlights on the left and the LEDs on the right. Of course, they're different colors, but aside from that, the amount of glare is pretty similar, which is to say, almost none. So I would say the LEDs passed this test. Okay, let's move on to the dash cam footage. This is basically what you're going to see when you're driving the car. We'll start with the halogen headlights. This is what the low beams look like. When the traffic lets up, I'll put on the high beams. And that's what the high beams look like. Now let's see what the LED headlights look like. Once again, this is the low beams. And now the high beams. And back to low beams. Okay, let's look at these side by side. Once again, we have the halogen headlights on the left and the LEDs on the right. The LEDs, of course, are a higher color temperature, and that makes them look brighter. But they also cover more area. Also, the LED headlights really light up the street signs. It's pretty impressive. In my opinion, the LED headlights are much better in this test. Alright, let's do the final test. For this test, we're simply going to park the car in front of a wall, shine the headlights on the wall, and see what it looks like. We'll start with the halogen headlights. The stock beam pattern is higher on the right side and lower on the left, and there's this angled part in the middle between them. The left part is lower so the headlights don't blind oncoming drivers. Or at least that's how they do it in the US because our cars are left-hand drive. So the big question is, do the LED headlights have the same cutoff pattern? Let's take a look. The good news is the LED headlights seem to have the same beam pattern. We have the left side lower than the right side with that angled part in the middle, just like the halogen headlights. That's good news because it means the LED lights have the correct beam pattern. So the LED headlights pass this test. Okay, so here are my conclusions. Of course, this is just my personal opinion. But the LED headlights passed all 3 tests. At the time I'm making this video, I've already been driving the car for about 3 months with the LED headlights. And in my opinion, there is no comparison. These LED headlights are, without a doubt, better than the halogen headlights they replaced. My only complaint, and this is a minor complaint, is that I'm not a big fan of the 6500K color temperature. Personally, I would prefer something more like 5500K. But once again, that's just my personal opinion. All things considered, I am very happy with these headlights. I was genuinely surprised at how good these headlights are. And last but not least, a big thank you to Auxito for providing these headlights. Anyway, that's it for this video. See you next time.